Today's guest is James Gable. He's an experienced superintendent, and he's also the host of the Uncommon Communicator. So, James, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, I know you work as in the construction side of things, and you also have the podcast called I believe, Uncommon Communicator. How did you come up with the name?
It was a slow burn, I would say. I had a list of names that I wanted for the podcast, and then I immediately went on to social media and started reserving them. So one of them was actually, it started with the Common Communicator. And then I thought, man, who wants to be common? And so that's when the whole idea of Uncommon Communicator hit. It's just kind of one of those, just ideas, those light bulb moments. And then I started searching around to see how many other uncommon communicators I could find. I found one guy, I think he's a teacher in Boston. He's somewhere on the East Coast who calls himself that on LinkedIn. And I haven't connected with him, or I think I tried to connect with him, but that's the only spot that I found the idea of the Uncommon Communicator. I do listen to the Uncommon Leader podcast. He and I are going to have to connect. So shout out to that gentleman, using the same terminology anyways. But that's how we came up with the Uncommon Communicator, because it goes back to, I also had in mind the idea of common sense, and that's why it started with the Common Communicator. Looking back at kind of the heyday of America, when people wrote things that meant deep things, and they wrote it in ways that were so engaging and so deep and so new and life changing at the time, or country changing. So that was kind of the seed that came with it, was the book Common Sense. But then that's where Common Communicator came in, and I'm like, no, we can't be common. We're going to need to be uncommon.
Okay, so how do we be uncommon in this world where communication and information is everywhere?
And so we had to come up with, and I keep saying I generated this, but I've got a great co-host, and he has jumped on board, and he completely believes in the tenets that we call it. But ideally, it starts with two things: is enlightenment. And the word enlightenment has scared a lot of people that I've talked to. They don't like that word. They picture some Hindu thing going on in some third world country, and it's not like that. And if you look at the word enlightenment itself, it just talks about that awakening, that acknowledgement that you gain a knowledge of something that you didn't know before. So it's about enlightenment, that communication is actually happening. And that's something that kind of goes back for most of my career, when I would watch people communicate and I'm like, he's not getting it. And I can see he's saying that this guy over here is like shaking his head and agreeing, but he's not getting it. And it even happened this week. I saw the same thing in a meeting today, where I heard somebody say something about on the schedule, and he goes, "Oh, so you're starting this week?" And he said, "Yeah." And on the schedule it was the 21st. So I heard it. I had to say something, because I could tell that there was just that lack of communication. So that starts with enlightenment. You have to recognize whether or not communication is going on. And then step two was this idea that you need to have ownership of your conversations. And that's probably the toughest part, because, and I'm married, I've been married over 20, 28, 29 years. Of course, so when you have somebody who is there to say, hey, you haven't owned every one of your conversations, because you don't. Like, there's times where I will, and certainly I'm just the average guy, right? I'm no expert negotiator, marriage counselor, none of that stuff. But there's times where you just don't have the energy, or you just don't want to engage in that conversation. But that's about taking ownership. When you see, hey, this isn't going the way it should be going, how can I bring clarity? And that's probably my biggest mission, is to bring clarity to the idea of communication, because it's so muddied, and it becomes really it's a complicated formula, but it's not. And that's why we wanted to break it down into the idea of enlightenment. First, recognize it. Next thing is, let's work on some tools. And working on those tools is what we like to do through our podcast, is just working with different things that are going to help you engage, that are somewhat simple, but some of the hardest things that I could ever do. We started with the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. that was just, I fell in love with that book. I probably read it a half a dozen times because I couldn't get it. I could not understand how he was turning the conversations around. My brain couldn't gather it. So through practice, through reading, through going through that, and then especially when we did the podcast on it, the idea of labels, the idea of mirrors, all of these tools that he's using in negotiation, which is really just listening. And that was eye opening for me as well. That's what you hear on a lot of really top notch communication, negotiation, sales type of podcasts or conversations, is it really comes down to listening. And I needed to become a better listener. And labeling, labeling is as easy as, it seems like, it feels like you're just repeating back what you think they're saying. So you can be on the same page, but it's showing that you're listening. You're not sitting there engaging, waiting to put in, your next word. You want to engage that person. Labeling, and then mirrors is easy. It's called the Jedi mind trick. You're nodding, so I'm guessing you know the book pretty well. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. But the idea of mirrors is just repeating the last sentence or the last thought or word that somebody gives you, and it's like a Jedi mind trick. And I would do it, and I'm still amazed when I would just say the word and somebody gives you more information. And so I started practicing those, and those took, it just took time to make it part of your, everyday conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So, you've done a lot of these episodes, and you've also crossed into the technology side of things. So, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and that's really hitting through COVID was a perfect time to kind of address this technology idea. I'm a Toastmaster. I'm a club growth director for District 26, which covers Colorado, Wyoming, an unpopulated part of Utah, and a little bit of Nebraska. But these being in this role, Toastmasters had to switch to this Zoom, and Zoom, they get great discounts through Zoom. But suddenly, this, you've heard the term Zoom fatigue. Everybody was going to Zoom. My company had uses Teams. And prior to that, it was just an app on my computer that none of us ever used, not even chat, nothing. It was there. We never used it. And so we started to engage in using that as, as a technology. And then as you start progressing, now it's been, I don't even remember how long. Has it been 3 years now? I've lost track. But this is now how it's going to be. This is not going anywhere. And I've been saying this for a long time. There were people engaging with their families across state lines, outside of the world, or in other parts of the world, outside the world, maybe, but within, outside of this, out of their little bubble in video chats that we never had those opportunities before or ever took opportunities. So it's changed how we communicate, like you and I are communicating. I've had this kind of chat with Jesse Hernandez. I think you had him on your show not too long ago either. He really helped spark me into podcasting.
Mm,
I heard he mentioned he had a podcast. I listened to it. I reached out to him. We had a great conversation. There's some other ties to Adam Hoots as well. Adam uh, had this when he started his business. He just says, "I'm just doing it. I'm going for it. Why wouldn't you?" It's just a simple post on LinkedIn, and it connected with me, and it made change in my life. And all of that putting together the idea of technology is we have so much impact right here, you and I meeting face to face, as well as we do within the format of podcasting. I hear your content every day. You are amazing at I see Tats everywhere, which is just amazing. When you see that type of engagement, I get to know you a little bit, even though you don't know me. And so that's the power of technology, as well as this format as well too, is we can have engagement this way. But there's some different rules, right? There's some different things that we have to do, and we've touched a little bit on that, and then as well as into social media and some of these other things that really do bring engagement and relationship through technology. In
mm,
some ways, we have to embrace it because it's not the same as a handshake in person. But in some other ways, this is greater than we ever could have. You and I would not be sitting face to face without the idea of Zoom, or some kind of media like that. And even through social media, we wouldn't get to know each other. And that's the part I think that has impacted me the most.
mm. So if you look at the construction industry, which is your day to day, and you look at, your Toastmasters and communications, what areas have the most opportunity for improvement or change?
Yeah, and those are so covering two different aspects. I'll cover the Toastmaster first. This Zoom format has allowed a lot of individuals to be in these Toastmaster meetings across the world. And now there's worldwide memberships within our own district, people that are regular members. So it's brought engagement worldwide, which is great. There is still there's a lot that left because this is not what they were in for. They were in for their meetings, their club meetings, their family. You build relationship when you speak and engage with an audience, and these are regular audiences. So that part is struggling through this hybrid idea. Are they going to do full meeting without just in person, or are they going to do a complete Zoom? The hybrid has been a struggle because there's money associated with it. There's how do you do it correctly? We're not production companies, so those are things that we're continuing to try to improve on the Toastmaster side. Now, construction, that's a completely different. And construction, every time there's a problem, it always comes down to communication. Every time this didn't get communicated, this was misunderstood, this guy never got the drawings, where's this, where's that? It's always communication. And that's probably why I have been so leaning towards the idea of lean construction. And those are the friends that I've made online through LinkedIn. I've had the pleasure of meeting Jesse. I've met Adam Hoots. I've met these individuals who are out there in the lean industry, as well as I've met some others through the podcasts that we've talked to on the phone with, and through LinkedIn, and also through the No BS with Jen and Jess live LinkedIn chats, right? All these are engagement things with people in the lean industry, because lean is communication. That's how I see it. And so that's the part that really engages me. Talking about, construction, I'm starting up a job right now that I'm making sure we're doing visual boards. That seems we have to do it in a way that visually communicates. I do a 4-week look ahead that a lot of my other, people within my same role don't use color. I color coded them per their trades. So things like that help communicate what that individual can see and do without having to fight for it. So that's item number one, visual boards. The other one is just really back to my idea of enlightenment. I'm every day on the job, I have an opportunity, and that's what I love about being a superintendent, is there's such a wide range of people that I'm going to interact with every day and have a chance to influence. And that's really my word this year, is impact. I want to make an impact on people. And that's one of the things that I'm really striving for. I have two words. I don't do resolutions, but I do words this year. This is the first time: impact and growth. And if I can bring growth to myself, I also want to bring growth to others. But within construction, that it's a challenge. We struggle with it. And I haven't came up with the fix for it other than influence. How many people can I influence? And then hopefully they're going to take that to their next job and communicate a little bit better.
Yeah. And as part of influence, do you tell stories? What are the
Yeah.
common stories you go to that you find yourself telling?
And I don't know that there's common stories. This is the benefit of being in construction for over 35 years. When I had a couple of young gentlemen on a job a couple of years ago, this is when I realized I'm the old guy. Both of them added up did not make my age. Like they were, two of them didn't make my age. And they had some fun with it. As a young guy, I gave a hard time to all the old guys. I have it coming to me. I earned it. But whenever something would come up, but there would be a story for me to relate something to them, to really help them understand a concept or teach them something about the construction trade, it always comes around to stories. And I have repeated a couple of them, but for the most part, they're just in the moment, like, hey, this happened to me, and this is what it went on, and this is where you can learn from it. Because there really are two ways to learn. And I think for the most part, I've tried to learn from other people's mistakes. So that's why I want to share stories of mistakes that I've made, and also mistakes that I've seen. You don't have to make the mistakes to be a better, to be better at that. So I was every once in a while, they would ask me a question, and then they'd both lean back. They're like, story time. So I didn't really have any, key stories, but I do find myself kind of refining them, and a lot of them have to do with just general construction stories, things that happen to say, hey, this is going on. I learned from this. Here's something else, that I picked up from it. And Probably the other part I really like about lean is lean tells you that you need to share. We need to tell people what we've learned and add it, help other people learn from it. And that's in the past, it had always been that tribal knowledge. It's that one superintendent who knows everything, and I don't want to ever be that disgruntled guy. There's always the old crabby superintendent because nothing's going to work because he's seen it all and done it all. And I get it a little bit more now because, like, why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? And it's because we're not passing it on. We're not sharing this information with our younger generation, and that has to come through stories.
Mm, very nice. What are you most curious about right now?
So right now, I'm glad you asked that, is this Chat GPT. That's the last episode that we just put out here this morning. And it was somewhere around December I started hearing about it, a lot of it on TikTok. And I thought for sure it was affiliate marketing. People was like, you got to try this and look at how I'm like, I'm not going to do it. And it really, I went through this whole almost philosophical, process with it as a communicator. Like, what is going on? Are the robots taking over? I don't know if I trust this AI. So I went through that, and then I'm like, I don't want to mess with it. And then I kept hearing all of these different things that were going on. One thing that popped up is there was a guy on LinkedIn who said he had created a list of something, and he said, hey, this was generated by Chat GPT, and that's what got me interested first in it. What are your thoughts? And I thought, I feel like I just got robbed. Like, you just didn't create this at all. And so what's going to happen with creativity? So with that, then I had to dive in. Like, I dove in, messed with it a little bit. And before you know it, it's that rabbit hole of information that's there. And it's very much like, a Google. It's something that is has information on it, but it's organizing it. And as I was looking at it, it was organizing it. I'm going to say in an uncommon communicator way. It was very logical, and it summed it up at the end. And you would ask it questions, over the course of a couple of different chats. And before you know it, it is kind of altering that message, but it's not the same stuff. I even asked the same question about some different things and got different responses. And I thought, holy cow, this is such a benefit of creativity. That's what I was afraid of, is it was just going to stifle creativity. I got to the point where I had to walk away. I'm like, I'm out of questions. Like, how can this one be more creative than me? I ran out of questions to ask this thing, that it's just so. That's my interest. I fear for us a little bit because I think somebody with a little bit of charisma and really good typing skills can get information presented. And before you know it, you don't know what information you're given. You're not getting that kind of deep understanding of a topic when you're just kind of sharing stuff off the surface. But I think we're going to know those people. And on the other side, I think there's benefits to it if it makes some things easier and you can focus on the important things, because it gives outlines. So it can give you an outline. So that's really been kind of it just kind of, I know we're going to talk about it a lot this year because, and I heard a presentation by Jordan B. Peterson that was talking about this specifically, and other AI stuff that he says, in the next 3 to 4 months, the stuff that is brewing out there is going to be incredible on the AI side. So that interests me as a communicator because it's bringing content, it's bringing information, and it's putting it in almost a logical sense. How are we going to be able to tell a difference between it? So that's been kind of my big interest as of late.
Interesting. Yeah, I look at it from a marketer from a different point of view. I look at it as tools become easier to do, and it essentially what it does is raises the bar, right? So if everyone can do something with the tool on social media, well, that no longer becomes unique and interesting. So essentially, the effort is the same. It's just the output is higher performance, right? Because you still have to stand out. So, just being good isn't good enough, and you need to be great. And these tools redefine what great is. So, I think we're going to see some special things. And then the second part of it is with every trend, there's an anti trend, right? So, if you go in the absolute opposite direction of AI, what is sitting there and what is the opportunity?
Yeah. Well, and you make a good point, and I think we're even on the same page with that, is that's it took me a while to get there, which is, what is this benefit going to bring? I remember, and I've been around long enough since cell phones were invented. and and then computers, laptops, right? It was going to make our life so much easier, and we were going to do things in less time. And now we're working longer hours than we ever have, but we're doing it better and faster. And I kind of see this as the same opportunity, as not necessarily killing creativity, but allowing us to be creative in other aspects. So, like any tool, like anything, it's going to get misused or overused. But I think the advantages are there. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I've drank the Kool-Aid. But it's I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what those next steps are. But I still do with a little bit of fear, just because I've been from that time of no cell phones to now. I'm chat and it's typing faster than I can ever type. It's smarter than 10,000 people. That there's so much brains that are in that. And then you got to wonder, one of the things that kind of creep me out, have you ever seen those robotic dogs? Like yeah, those robotic, they're kind of scary to begin with. I saw a video where they had like, I don't know, 100 of them in a room doing the same thing at the same time. It's frightened me. And now they're thinking, but those are all things that go to my mind. But I think it's going to hopefully help our overall communication, just by helping people think more logically, even if they learn by that. Because back to that point of, it really does think logically. It gives good information and a summary. How many times have you been in a conversation and you're like, where were we going? We get lost somewhere in the middle and you're off on some other land, because that's just how our minds, kind of track that way. But to be able to have something that's concise, something that's logical, something that sums it up, I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Is there anything I didn't ask but you want to mention or share?
That's you. First off, you're a great question asker. And I've been wanting to say this for a long time. Jesse, back to my friend Jesse Hernandez. I hate to keep dropping names here, but he calls himself the great questionator, and he's really good at questions. You are fantastic. I love how you weave questions. That's why I like listening to your podcast. So I knew you were going to ask that question. I've got nothing. Like, I think you've asked it all.
Well, thank you, James. And like I said, your podcast is extremely engaging, and I recommend anyone to check it out. So thank you, James.
Appreciate that.